Coordinating Committee. Let's start with introductions. We'll go around the room, and if you could just give your name and your affiliation. So I'm Deb White from City of Moorhead City Council.
Julie Bommelman, City of Fargo Transit Director.
Mike Reitz, Moorhead Assistant City Manager.
John Strand, City Commission Fargo.
Roddy, General Manager Transit. Josh Gordon, Assistant General Manager for Transit.
Sean Cole, Mobility Manager, MATBUS.
Luke Rittner, Transit Planner, MATBUS.
Jordan Smith, Assistant Director, City of Fargo MATBUS.
Ian McLean, Assistant City Attorney for Fargo.
Susan Thompson, City of Fargo Fire.
Assistant Trans Director. Adam Altenberg, MetroCog.
Aiden Young, MetroCog.
Great. Now we'll go up to our folks on who are online who didn't get to have the muffins with us today. So if you could just take turns unmuting yourself and introduce yourself.
Hi, Denise Kolpak, City Commission Fargo.
Sebastian McDougall, City of Moorhead.
Jenica Flanagan, City of Moorhead Finance.
Dan Benson, Sanford Health.
Great. Is there anyone else online? Okay, thank you, everybody. We'll start with item 1, call to order and introductions we've done. Everyone should have had a chance to review the agenda. Is there any changes to the agenda? If not, I will entertain a motion to approve the agenda for today's meeting.
So moved.
Second? A second? Second. Okay, we have a motion and a second. Any further discussion? Hearing none, all in favor signify by saying aye.
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 Any opposed? Motion carries. Item B, I hope everyone had a chance to check over the minutes from our January meetings. Was there any changes to the minutes? If not, I will entertain a motion to approve the minutes from January 15th, 2025.
So moved.
Did I hear a motion?
Yeah, I did it.
Okay, McDougall? And is there a second? Okay, second from Reitz. Any further discussion? Hearing none, all in favor signify by saying aye.
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 Any opposed, same sign? Motion carries. Moving into our action items. Our first one, 2A, we'll have Julie discuss the City of Fargo Transit Department Federal Transit Administration Drug and Alcohol Policy Manual. So I hope y'all had time to read through all of that and didn't fall asleep too many times.
Thank you, Madam Chair. We are required by Federal Transit to have in place a drug and alcohol program that applies to safety sensitive employees. I put a list together of employees that are within the City of Fargo that are covered under this policy, which is has been redone. We had a recent drug and alcohol audit and did make some changes and updates to this. They have reviewed and approved the policy. In addition, we also, our contractor, TransDev, and we have Josh and Matt here from TransDev. They also have, and it's a standalone policy, that everyone in their organization is considered safety sensitive. So their policy is separate than ours, but very similar as they follow the same regulation. So happy to answer any questions. There's a lot of details to this. And I certainly don't expect everybody to understand them, but essentially, if you're in a safety sensitive position, you fall under this policy. If you're not safety sensitive, you fall under the overarching City of Fargo drug and alcohol policy. So everybody's covered. It's just under which particular authority you're covered. So what we're looking for is to be able to move this forward for approval to the City Commission and send it to FDA.
So is this an amendment to the Fargo city policy or does transit have its own?
Transit has its own, and that would be this, yeah. They are very similar though.
And the intern is a safety sensitive position?
Yeah.
That should be a technician intern, correct?
Yes, yes.
That is an intern out in the maintenance facility.
Oh, well, that
That makes sense. And I should clarify that, yeah. Yeah, listed under maintenance, but if you're right, it should say that. So we can make that a little clarification.
Other questions or comments?
Yes, I move approval.
Is there a second?
I'll second.
Any further discussion? If not, all in favor, please signify by saying aye. Oh, I'm sorry, we have roll call. Yes, yep, we're in our action items. Thank you for the reminder. Ed. I really would make it like this. Yeah, roll call vote.
Baumelman,
Yes.
Flanagan,
Yes.
Griffith,
Yes.
Colpack,
Aye.
McDougal,
Aye.
Reeds,
Yes.
Strand,
Yes.
Thompson,
Yes.
White.
Yes.
Did I miss anyone?
Okay, motion carries. Moving on to item 2B, Link FM update and recommendation. Cole.
Thank you. So we wanted to bring forward Link FM again. We talked about it a couple of months back here. After having some discussions with Mike Reeves and some other Moorhead city staff about construction kind of timeline and planning for 2025. We unfortunately learned that kind of with the construction going on off, we'll kind of lose access to the north portion of the parking lot and some of the roads, including 3rd Street North, which Link FM route travels on, will be unavailable for certain periods of time. Because of that uncertainty and not necessarily knowing when the time of thing will work out, we are bringing forward a recommendation to permanently discontinue Link FM. This is in combination with just kind of some other factors. Looking back, Link FM has been a event episodic service since 2020. It used to be a permanent circulator that would run downtown. It was reduced to specific events. Obviously, COVID impacted that quite a bit over the last couple of years, and we had the reinstating service on the route for events over the last few years. One thing that we have found is that more people are utilizing the downtown parking structures that have since been built after Link FM service was initially started back in, I think it was 2014 or somewhere around there. So that's another aspect in all this too, that we've just seen general decrease in ridership outside of mainly the one large event that we cater to, which is the street fair downtown. There are also some other factors that we've considered in all of this. It's not available to those of you who are online, but I handed out some additional documentation here. One of which is an email chain with Lori Van Beek, the former Moorhead Transit Manager, speaking to the Minnesota Department of Transit, or Transportation, sorry. So with that, we reduced our service hours last year. It was approved mid-June. So we went from ending service at 11:15 p.m. to ending at 10:15 p.m. Unfortunately, the Blue Stem Troll and musical events go past that 10:15 end time. So Lori was able to get approval from MnDOT for last year's events, even though we were ending at 10:15. We extended to 11:15 to be able to allow those people to get back home and still service those events that year. Now that our hours have been officially adopted to be 10:15 p.m., don't believe that's longer a possibility, as we're not able to operate service outside of our established service hours, being Link FM service to the Blue Stem Amphitheater for those Trollwood events. So with that, I would definitely like to open up discussion, answer any questions that anyone has. Another document that I provided to the people here is information on the cost per event. Link FM's estimated cost per hour is $67.67. That includes the driver services costs as well as estimated fuel and maintenance cost amounts. So there is a broken out information based on ridership, the cost per event and then what it breaks out for a cost per ride. So just going through that quick for the folks online here, we serviced Celtic Festival. We had 7 hours for the service. The event cost was $473. Ridership was 67 people, which estimated about a $7.07 cost per ride. Scandinavian Festival, 16 hours for the event, $1,082 for the total cost. 42 rides given, which is about approximately $25.78 per passenger. The street fair, we had 64 hours, including 3 vehicles that were on the route. Approximate cost of $4,330 with 2,741 rides given, which breaks out to about $1.58 per ride. Pangea, 7 hours for the event, $473, 30 rides given. Approximately $15.79. And then the one event that we've had so far in 2025, the Frostival Frozen Fortress, we're out there for 5 hours. Cost of the event was approximately $338, and we did not have any rides on that one. And then the Blue Stem events that are servicing the Blue Stem Amphitheater in Moorhead. In 2024, the Trollwood Plays totaled 34 hours. The total cost per event was about $2,300, had 872 rides, approximately $2.64 per ride. And then the Pride in the Park event, which was for 6 hours. Cost per event was approximately $406 with 304 rides, estimating about $1.34 per ride. So would just like to kind of discuss. Happy to answer any additional questions that anyone may have.
Questions? I will start out. So, because obviously I think Moorhead is the one that's most adversely impacted by this. So a couple of things. I know when we talked about it before, we also had it broken down by the hours, and I spoke with the folks at HCSCC about some of the events at the Yemcomb Center. And when we looked at it, there were times where it was really, most of it was just, there was a couple of peak hours, and they were fine with cutting it back to if you had, say, a 1 or 2 hours where it was available. But, you know, when I spoke with the executive director, she thought they could go without it. But it is something for folks on fixed incomes, if you want to go with your family and you lack transportation, it's a way for you to get access to those events. And so it would potentially provide that opportunity for those people. I think for me, the Blue Stem one is the big issue, and that's, I'd asked to have this data shared and because we do have a real issue with Blue Stem of when people, you know, well, I'll just give the example of Pride in the Park. That event, we added Link FM last year, and in its very first year, it had some of the highest usage. And so you can see that that one had, in that first year, for that one-day event, 304 people, and the cost per ride was $1.34, which is lower than almost all the others. The year before, when there was no Link FM, the road going into Blue Stem was like a parking lot, and we had a lot of unhappy people because there's just too much congestion. And so it really helped to alleviate some of those issues. So I guess going from all or nothing, I'd love to see some sort of a happy medium. And also some of these have people, you know, are they sort of planning on it? These events are well underway, and then we're telling them now, no, we're not going to be able to provide that as a resource for this year. My last question, I guess, is when I read this is the first time I've seen the email. It doesn't sound to me like they are completely closing off the opportunity to maybe continue with the Blue Stem. So would there be a possibility to ask, we did it last year, would there be a possibility to ask them again if we could still have that exception to allow drivers for the Blue Stem events? So that's a lot of questions, and I'll just stop right there.
Sure. I guess I personally haven't talked to Maddie over at the MnDOT offices. It's definitely something that we could ask them to see if it's a possibility. I know generally I guess I'm not sure what Lori has experienced in the past with talking with operating things outside of service hours, because I know there was a couple of Blue Stem Theater cancellations, I think it was the year before, and we operated on Sunday to provide service to those events, even though that was outside of our normal operating hours. So definitely a question I could pose to MnDOT. I guess outside of that, the downtown events, I feel like will be a bit harder because of the construction and kind of knowing that timeline. I'd say that kind of out of all these, Ride in the Park is probably the most likely that we would still be able to service. Like I said, I can definitely look into the Trollwood potentially being an exception, but as far as the construction phasing, I guess I'm not entirely sure on what that would look like throughout the summer.
I'm gonna touch too a little bit on the Minnesota funded vehicle for Pride in the Park.
Yeah. So currently the city of Moorhead has a completely state funded vehicle. Because of that, they do not fall under the federal charter service regulations. That vehicle is scheduled to be replaced in 2027.
Yeah.
And after that point, we wouldn't have access to that anymore. So it is a possibility that we'd be able to provide service for the next couple of years, but then after that point, that may be a little bit more difficult for us to achieve.
I think it was time to work on another road into Blue Stem.
There you go.
Were there additional providers besides us that provided service to those events? Does anybody know?
I believe there was. They had private.
I don't know.
Mhm.
Okay.
For state funding, because it's specific money that we get for these events, how much would we be giving up in Minnesota in funding for Minnesota?
These events pretty much fell within Lori's budget.
Okay,
So there was no like additional above and beyond funding that was given for the event.
but it's a use it or lose it, right? So if we're not using it on that, it's
You're right.
not like we can shift it to someplace else. So we've got funding that we'd be giving up. And so potentially if we had to say, cover the cost by coming up with some other mechanism, we would have to pay for that ourselves rather than using some of the state funds, right?
Yeah.
Is there any, just a question, is there any potential contribution from like Pride or from Yom Kippur or others that would contribute toward our costs?
I think it certainly could be pursued.
They may not want to lose it, and they may find that it's worth their investment also. I don't know, I'm just.
Yeah, that's a good question.
On the other hand, we have a job to simplify our budget and to pull in our belts too. You know, really, and it adds up.
Does anybody know, did Lori go to MnDOT and request additional funds? Or I guess I'm not sure how the budget worked for, it just so happened there was funding. Tara, do you know?
I don't know if it was earmarked specifically for them. I know she had a worksheet she used every year to estimate the cost per event based on hours, vehicle miles, all of that. I don't know if she broke it down and then gave that to MnDOT though.
Okay. So maybe we should look into some of that stuff before we hold on that.
Well, yeah,
I
I think if there's specifically dedicated funds for this, then, you know, the memo states that the cost savings will be distributed through the previously approved, you know, cost allocation spreadsheet. I don't know if there's, if it's specific grant funding that goes toward this,
I know from talking to Lori before.
that somewhat limits the benefit to the overall system, I think, you know,
The reason I thought that it was is I know that there are certain criteria of what types of events can use the funds. And so that's why I wondered if there are if it is a specific fund that is for these types of things, because it wasn't just general.
Yeah, I don't know the answer to that, but we can find the answer to that.
I think the criteria we were using for the events was more so based on charter regulations and determining whether something was like a widespread community event.
Yeah.
And it, my look at this is that the Blue Stem events are certainly much more cost effective than the rest of them.
Yeah.
And so I guess from more a staff perspective, I think, taking a look at preserving the Blue Stem events in some way may, make some sense, basically because there's actually there's a transportation issue in that area. The events at the MCOMST, I think, that's something that I think we can probably manage. The ridership isn't that large.
Yeah. I guess along those lines, so one action could be that we could decide today to cut out the downtown events and then continue to explore whether to keep the Blue Stem. The one thing I am thinking, so like Celtic Fest, that is in a few weeks.
Yes.
Yeah. Scandinavian Fest is June.
Yep.
Yeah. That would be my only thing. Like if they have already advertised for Celtic Fest or anything with, that there will be Link FM. So it would take effect immediately.
Sure. So what we've done in the past with Celtic Fest and may still be able to do it this year is we've utilized the City of Fargo City Hall parking lot as kind of a turnaround point. So one concern that we had potentially for future events is that the Morehead Center Mall parking lot currently is being plowed out. So depending on snow, it may or may not be a usable turnaround point for us. So I'd say we could still look into doing the Celtic Fest event this year. Scandinavian Fest, I'm not entirely sure based on construction timelines, because that is one that we would go back to utilizing the Morehead Center Mall parking lot.
And that one had such low usage too. I mean, it was, again, if you're thinking we're subsidizing at $25.78 a rider, you can get them an Uber. So that's where, again, I would think like either you get rid of it or you cut it down to a very short period of time.
And yet we have to make some tough decisions.
Yeah.
For the sake of discussion, I will move the advanced recommended motion just to get it on the table.
Is there a second to eliminate, for the motion to eliminate Link FM?
This is Denise. I'll second.
Okay, more discussion. So I'll say I would not be in favor of completely eliminating at this time. I'd like to keep Blue Stem on the table. And perhaps my inclination would be to, for Celtic Fest, since again, it's 2 weeks out, that we should probably not back out of that one. But beyond that, I think it would be fine to, if people are okay with it, to eliminate the other downtown events.
Have we had any discussions with the organizers of the Celtic Festival?
What about street fair? Not to shift lanes too quick, but I mean, I know over the years we've had quite a few riders, but we always ask people to park in the Morehead Center Mall ramp, and that's not going to be available to us, right? For street fair.
So you might have more need.
I believe so.
Okay.
Yeah, I think between the parking lot being off limits, and I guess I can't remember from our discussions if the ramp itself will be closed.
I think the ramp would be available, although
It's
we're,
not accessible.
Third Street.
Yeah, the street's gonna be closed
well,
potentially.
potentially. I think the problem is we're gonna be doing some construction on Third. So, you know, that adds adds to the disruption in that area. And yeah, I think for the street fair with the addition of the parking ramps over recent years in downtown Fargo, I mean, it is primarily something that's running people from Moorhead. And yeah, I think this year it'll be pretty difficult.
Have we coordinated much on this? Have we been in discussions with the organizers for the street fair? Because that is, yeah, that is the highest usage area even now. So close to 3,000 people last year. Again, if they're sort of, that you would want to really get out ahead of it and say, we're not going to have this. You need to look at these other alternatives.
Yep, we haven't currently, but it was kind of depending on the discussion today of what we want to go forward with, if we would reach out to them and either say we will be able to do it, but it might be hindered, or we're not going to be able to provide the service.
I think with the addition of the parking ramps in downtown Fargo, that has, I know the ridership had, even though it was high, close to 3,000 last year, in the past, it's been much higher. So it has impacted it. And I would assume those ramps would be available for use. But we always are included in their discussions, street fair and stuff, so we can certainly.
Yeah. But if we vote to eliminate it, then that sort of closes the door, whereas they might say, we would like to keep it for a bit and maybe we'll help, going back to our earlier point, then maybe they'll help subsidize it too, if they want to keep it going. How did the Fargo folks here feel about eliminating that?
I would not be opposed to eliminate. It makes sense when you don't have space to.
Another thing I can mention too, that we had talked about when we were initially looking at some of these proposed changes, is it might be an opportunity to see if we do get any sort of input from the public as to events that matter to them, as to if they find the service beneficial. And, in 2025 especially, we're going to have difficulties with the Moorhead Center Mall parking lot and Third Street being closed, but it's something that we could look at in future years in terms of public feedback.
Anyone online have comments or questions they'd like to share?
This is Denise Kolpak. I think, first of all, it seems like we're missing some information to make a really informed decision here. But I think overall my reaction is we're going to have to start making some cuts somewhere, and I think part of it, and I hope this doesn't come across as callous, but part of, we can't keep paying for everything and still, we can't be where we are on some of these budgeting issues and provide all the same services we've been providing. Pretty soon, some things are going to have to change, and there will be real life implications because of the realities of our budget shortfalls. And when you look at this data, it does add up to Commissioner Strand's point. And I think part of the messaging could be, and it's hard doing this virtually, I'm sorry, but part of the message could be, this is one of the implications of where we are with our financing and our budget considerations right now. So those are my comments, if that makes sense.
No, that's very helpful. Anybody else online? Commissioner Strand, I'm just was going to ask for if you'll accept a friendly amendment to just keep the Blue Stem events in, and change it to just the downtown events, only because we really do right now have an issue in Moorhead that facility is a great facility and people love using it, but we have some real issues of people getting in and out of there. And so even if we were able to get 2 years to maybe as a city talk about what we might do to work on some of those congestion issues, that might be helpful. And we're talking about under $3,000. And again, if the state is, some of that is state funding, right? So, yeah.
And all of those costs will be passed on to Moorhead.
Mhm,
As
yes.
a special service, the cost for that event would be.
Yeah.
paid.
Madam Chair.
Currently is.
Would, and I think Commissioner Colfax, right, there might be some information which could help us. Would you prefer we just we've all vetted this for the moment, we just put it on the table till next month?
I would also be comfortable with that.
And let the Minnesota Moorhead side folks talk to the Yom Pride Festival and Blue Stem and also DCP. And then we get back.
I think that's fair.
I'm okay with that. I'll withdraw my motion.
Okay,
I'll withdraw my second.
great. Okay. And that, of course, I think that guarantees that we'll have the Celtic Festival, right?
And they need to know we're pulling in our belts
Yeah,
and we may need help. And if they can
Mhm.
contribute, that'll help us decide too.
great point. So along those lines, can we just make sure that we formally say that we're going to reach out to the entities involved? So the Fargo folks will be reaching out to the street fair. Yeah, that's just the street fair. And then we'll be reaching out to the folks on the Moorhead side and talking to them about the possibility of elimination of this and see if they wanted to put some money into it or.
And I do sit on the DCP board, so whoever wants to reach out to them, I can connect you to Ron Schneider.
Okay. And then we'll also look into that state funding to look at, again, some of the stipulations on usage. Are there any other questions that people would like to have answered at our next meeting before we act on this? Okay, hearing none, let's move on then to our next item on the agenda. So we have the 90-minute transfer policy. Jordan.
Alrighty, so 90-minute transfer policy. So currently, you pay a bus fare and you get a 90-minute transfer. This is true on if you're paying cash, you get a paper transfer on the bus. If you're paying with your Connect card, it automatically puts a transfer on your card. And then also if you buy a mobile ticket, you get also a second mobile transfer. There are some discrepancies between those 3 different types of transfers. We currently have restrictions on our paper transfers and the transfers that are on the Connect card. Because of the way the software works, we cannot have any restrictions on the mobile ticket transfer. Currently, those restrictions are same route, same direction, or same route, different direction. So basically, somebody can't get on a bus, go to Walmart, get back on that same bus and get home in 90 minutes, only pay 1 fare. That's the way it's set up today. We have seen a couple complaints from riders, specifically one rider on Route 11 who uses the VA on a regular basis. Route 11 is the only route that services VA. So if that person needs to run and get a prescription, they can take the bus there, quickly get their prescription. They theoretically could get on the next bus. However, because it won't allow them back on the bus with the transfer, because it's the same route, they have to pay another fare then to use the bus to get back home. So that's just one example of probably many that happen within the system. It's pretty standard in our industry to have a 90-minute transfer that is good wherever in the system without any restrictions. So we are requesting the approval of the elimination of the restrictions on all the transfers. So basically someone would pay a fare and they would have 90 minutes to use that fare, that ticket to ride anywhere, any route, any direction. We don't feel like this would have a huge implication on our fare revenues because I think the amount of times that somebody would take a bus and be able to do what they need to do and turn around and get back on the same bus to get home would be pretty minimal. But I think it allows more free travel for people on the system. So discussions.
Questions, comments? If not, this is an action item, so I'll entertain a motion to approve the change in policy for the 90-minute transfer.
So moved.
Okay, McDougal, is there a second?
I'll second.
Okay, good second. Y'all need some more coffee. And we'll have a roll call. Here, is there any further discussion? Okay, roll call vote.
Ballman,
Yes.
Flanagan,
Yes.
Griffith,
Yes.
Colpack,
Aye.
McDougal,
Aye.
Reeds,
Aye.
Stevens,
Yes.
Strand,
Yes.
Thompson,
Yes.
White.
Yes. Motion carries. Okay, moving on to 2D, real-time passenger information pilot program.
Thank you. So back in summer of last year, we implemented a new fare system called GMV Synchromatics. This was a really big jump in technology for us compared to our previous such system, which I believe was implemented back in 2009. So we have a lot of new features that we have access to now. One thing that is an option from that system that we chose not to implement initially, but we're looking at the possibility of doing now, is providing real-time information to passengers. So with that, it gives a number that passengers can either call or text. They provide the bus stop number at their current stop, and it provides information on when the next available bus will be there in real time. So looking at ways to improve the system for riders, make more information readily available, reduce our dispatcher call volumes. We see this as a pretty good option. There are some initial startup costs to it, initial fees, including the SMS provisioning fee and IVR provisioning fees, which total $3,725. As well as ongoing fees, annual service fee for IVR usage and annual fee for SMS usage, which includes 3,000 texts per month, and any text above that is an additional 0.25 cents each. So what we're looking at today is to propose starting a pilot program, more or less to see the popularity of offering this to passengers as an option. We're looking at initially starting with 20 of the most popular stops throughout the metro area. We would do the research and determine based on ridership and ensure to include different cities involved too. So providing that across the system to measure text usage mostly to determine long-term budget implications based on that. As you can see in the memo, there's an example from the Minneapolis Transit Agency. Just kind of showing what that looks like. You can see the stop number on their numbers to call or text for their next trip, which is the kind of what we're looking at here. One question that was asked is if we were to implement this across the entire system, kind of what that would look like in terms of cost per year. We would have to determine exactly how many text messages we'd be receiving. So that'd be kind of what we're looking at for this pilot program. But in terms of capital for the actual signage that we'd have to put up on every single bus stop in the system, we have approximately 823 bus stops. And we are estimating that it'd be about $16,500 at roughly $20 per sign, as well as the yearly fees of approximately $2,178 plus any additional fees for text. So with that, I'm happy to answer any questions that anyone has.
So what are the parameters of the pilot program? Is it like a certain timeline that you're gonna do it and they charge you to use it, or is it a test?
Yep, they would be charging us to use it. So there'd be that initial startup fee of $3,700 and then planning to do it for 1 year. So it'd be the 1 year fee of the $2,178. So approximately a little less than $6,000, which we do have available in our budget through our software fees. With that, we would be evaluating the usage of the pilot program to determine the additional text messaging fees. Once we pay the initial startup fee, technically all of the stops in our system would have the real-time information available. It's just when we provide the stop number to the passengers to be able to call and text in. So once we have it initially set up, we'd be able to continually expand if it's something that we see is beneficial to the passengers, and also kind of determine the usage of it along the way for the additional budget implications.
Well, I'm wondering, so I did ask about the, if we scaled it up, how much more would that cost? And looking at this, you said 20 bus stops out of 823. So we're only talking about 2% of all of the bus stops that we have. Do you know, though, what percent of the ridership roughly is that 20 bus stops? Because these are all higher usage ones. I know I'm putting you on the spot. Yeah.
Well, generally along some of our major routes, obviously our ground transportation center, West Acres Transit Hub, and Marriott Transfer Hub are kind of our large ones. Those have pretty well-established time points, and passengers are very familiar with that. So probably wouldn't target those. There are other stops in our service area that I know just offhand can get anywhere from 10 to 25 passengers per day. So estimating probably 250 people traveling through those 20 stops. So we can look at potentially expanding to additional stops. We could say 10% of our total estimated stops to do 80 initially, depending on what people's thoughts are, but mostly just trying to get a gauge of usage.
Yeah, I think that was my question, is if we're going to do this, I think it's a good idea to test it out, but to get a good representative or enough data that really indicates people's interest in using it. If it was so sporadic that it was, that people, if we're thinking only 2% of bus stops have it, then fewer people will use it because they're, not, they know that it's hit or miss. However, if we get, if those are the ones where the majority of people are riding, so if we get something that really is where most of the riders are, then people will probably, be more accustomed to using it. And so do you feel that the 20 is sufficient, or we're like again, I would want to have something that gets a good percentage of ridership.
Sure. I guess I would say that we could look at implementing it at additional stops to kind of get a better feel of the system. Maybe look at a total percentage of riders versus the stops. So just say, because we get 1.2 million rides per year. So maybe we look at stops that total 10% of that. So 120,000 rides per year, and go about it that way and determine how many stops through that.
And along those lines, some of these are fixed costs, and so the added cost would be signs, but beyond that, what would be some of the other variable costs that if we scaled it up a bit?
Just signs, and then text messaging fees above the 3,000.
3,000 per month.
So it'd be pretty easy for us to monitor how many text messages we're getting in a month.
Yep.
So if we put out 20 or 30 stops and we're getting 600 text messages a month, we could pretty easily say that, well, let's expand that to 50 or 60, see how many text messages we get. Okay, now we're getting 1,500. Okay, let's expand that another 10 or 20, so we kind of have that. We can kind of expand up until we're seeing that we're meeting this base, and then kind of see how many that is and how much is being used from there. So.
I could, Madam Chair.
Yes.
Just a couple of things I thought maybe we would look at is I would imagine in areas where we have a higher college student ridership, those would be more highly utilized. They're just more tech savvy. Maybe they're not, but they seem to be more tech savvy. And secondly, budget within is it one of our grants? Sorry, I should know this. I
was just thinking the other services line item.
Okay.
A little bit of extra money in there.
And we would not be increasing or asking for additional funding for any of those.
That's
okay. Thank you.
Other questions or comments?
Is it possible that by doing this, you would eventually increase your ridership because people would get more? I mean, I think that we talked about needing to control our costs, but I think we need to be strategic on what we do and don't spend it on. And if this is something that could enhance the experience with more riders, that would be a good.
Make sure it's as user-friendly for your average person as possible.
Yeah. I think it's the kind of thing people are looking for now, and yeah.
Well, I think with all the news stories that we've been seeing on, possibly education, transportation, being cut back, parents might feel more comfortable putting their kids on our system if they can know exactly when that bus is coming and it might help.
So if we were to, so it sounds like maybe modifying the recommendation.
Yeah, I guess I would say go for 10% of the system. Estimate 80 stops, so we put it up out of the 823. Target the higher ridership areas to be able to determine that. And then if we find that, like Jordan said, we can measure the text message volumes and either scale up or scale back and then determine exactly kind of what that number is.
You want to do 10% of the ridership? Say that ends up being like 30 stops. Do you want to do 30 stops or do you want to do 10% of the stops?
I guess I would say it depends on if the board is comfortable with us going ahead without having those numbers on hand. We could go off of the ridership. I'm just not entirely sure how many stops that'd be.
Your recommendation would be 10% of ridership.
If that'd be approved.
Are people comfortable with that? Okay, I don't hear anybody objecting, but would anyone like to make a motion that we pursue staff's recommendation to pilot the real-time passenger information pilot program for 10% of ridership? Anybody want to make that motion?
I'll make that motion.
Okay. Is there a second?
Second.
Any further discussion? Hearing none, roll call vote.
Bummelman,
Yes.
Flanagan,
Yes.
Griffith,
Yes.
Kolpak.
Oh, she had to leave.
Okay.
She texted.
Okay.
She put it in the chat.
Oh.
Yep. She had to call into another meeting.
McDougal,
Aye.
Reeds,
Yes.
Stevens, Strand,
Yes.
Thompson,
Yes.
White.
Yes. All right, moving on to our last action item, Route 24 Sanford Health Amber Valley campus request and route change. Luke.
So recently Sanford Health reached out to us requesting Route 24 would service their new Amber Valley campus, which is located just southeast of the Sanford Medical Center. Hoping that would begin in April 2025. We're joined by Dan Benson online. Dan, would you be able to tell the group just kind of what's going into the new campus and maybe a brief timeline of the changes to come?
Yes, I can certainly do that. Thank you, guys. Appreciate the time to share this. But yes, the previous what's commonly known to as the Prax building has been occupied by a handful of tenants, but pretty low utilization and occupancy over the course of the last 5 or 10 years. Sanford is in the process of a phased takeover of the majority of that space there. There's 250,000 square feet there. Over the course of 24, 25, and 26, we have plans to occupy probably about 80% of that 250,000 square feet. The key tenant or one of the key aspects of our move there is relocating our residency clinic from downtown at our Broadway campus out to this area. Currently, they have about 30 exam rooms. It's a pretty large and significant clinic. It is led by the residents. The reason for this move is to develop an education center effectively at the Amber Valley campus, the old Prax building, for Sanford, for the residents to house out of, along with other institutions, specifically with medical education. So UND is currently renovating space out there on campus as well. The University of Jamestown is currently open and has students at that campus, along with the rest of our Sanford education group that'll be coming out here next fall as we do our, again, new employee orientation onboarding, our ACLS PALS training, basic life safety skills, all that education focus is shifting out to that campus. And the request would be to, again, restore access back to the building. I understand the Prax facility used to have access to the bus route. It did not now, obviously with a very low occupancy within the building, but it's an education campus. It's Sanford's future education campus, and a residency clinic is planning to move out there on April 29th. That's a preliminary go live date of the clinic, and adding bus route to this facility, or a bus stop at the facility, would help ensure equitable access to the healthcare, specifically if our people that have utilized the residency clinic downtown want to continue to utilize that. Their providers are now out here at the Amber Valley campus. So
Thank you, Dan. So you can take a look at the map below and see existing Route 24 and those changes. We just alter the route slightly to hit the Amber Valley campus on the outbound. And then another change I'll talk about after that. So I did some on the road testing to see how service would affect it, or how this change would affect service. It would add approximately 3 minutes to the total trip length of Route 24. I talked to some drivers and their supervisors, and they seemed to be fine with it and didn't see any issues with the layout or the timing. And then another change that we are proposing to the route is the loop around Shields Arena there. We've had frequent issues with needing to detour for events, event traffic congestion and snow removal issues. So we're suggesting removing that route or removing that loop and instead just continuing south on 51st Street south there while still servicing the Shields Arena. This change would only remove one route, which in 2023 only had 0.2 boardings per day, so not a lot of ridership over there. And it would reduce the overall trip length by 2 minutes. So both of these changes would only add 1 minute to the route. So not a huge effect, but also providing service to the Amber Valley campus would be a huge benefit. Are there any questions or comments on these changes?
Anyone? Does anyone online have any questions or comments? If not, I will be looking for a motion to approve this change. Okay, is there a second?
Second.
Any further discussion? Hearing none, roll call vote.
Bobelman,
Yes.
Flanagan,
Yes.
Griffith,
Yes.
McDougal,
Aye.
Reeds, yes, Stevens,
Yes.
Strand,
Yes.
Thompson, White.
Yes. Great, okay, motion carries. Moving on to our informational items. Jordan, you can start us off with a discussion on the 26 driver services.
Yeah, so a few months ago at one of our meetings, we had initially discussed the possibility of 2026 driver services being contracted drivers or possibly being City of Fargo drivers, or, MATBUS drivers employed by the City of Fargo. The biggest thing I heard from the last meeting was cost, right? I mean, that's kind of what it's all boils down to, the cost to provide the service whether it be with a contractor, whether they be in-house drivers. HR did look at all of our job descriptions and give us an initial grading of the pay scales for those job descriptions. So we were able to accurately estimate kind of what those costs would be. And as you can see from the memo, the costs are pretty similar. Contracted staff, we're estimating from what our last contracts have been and our year-over-year increases, we're estimating about a 24% increase in that contract. Just because it is the end of the contract, we would have to go out for proposals for a new contract. Historically, we've seen about a 20 to 24, 25% increase when we start a new contract after we bid. So, our estimated cost for a contractor is about $10.1 million. City employees, we're looking about the same, 10.195. It's about a $50,000 difference. That 10.195 does include all 100% of employees being fully benefited. City of Fargo did a benefits survey here a couple months back, and 82% or 88% of the City of Fargo employees currently have benefits with City of Fargo. So if we realistically assume that 12% of these employees are not going to take benefits, that's about a $300,000 less than what we're estimating here. So in theory would be less than what we are estimating that a contractor would cost us. City employees, it would provide the drivers a little higher pay rate than what the contractor would probably propose. I did look at multiple contracts that TransDev currently has out there in our region, and the drivers are in that $25 to $26 an hour range. City of Fargo graded the positions at a grade 10, assuming a 4.5% increase for 2026 would be about 27. So, we'd have the benefit of being able to offer higher wages, better benefits, for, potentially a lower cost than what we would expect with a contract. So, there are a couple other considerations taken into account. We are having discussions with NDERF about insurance costs and their concerns of having a contractor and insuring a vehicle that's driven by a contractor. And Ian can speak a little bit more to that. We've been having some issues lately with some legal stuff when it comes to accidents, insurance, and a contractor. And then also just kind of the implications of costs that NDERF may put on our policy if we continue with a contractor and the concerns there.
Yeah, so North Dakota has a cap on a political subdivision. So it's usually $437,000 to $500,000. Right now, that cap does not apply because they're contractors. So either if they become in-house, that cap would apply, so our insurance company would be happy. So the premiums would probably come down. We're trying to get that. We're trying to get those numbers. They're coming to town in the next couple of weeks, and we'll have those numbers. The other way would be if we contracted with the contractor and say we're only going to be liable for first $437,500, then you're on hook for the rest. Right now, we're on hook for the first $2 million. So if we were to bring that cap down, now the contractor might say, well, then I want you to pay more as part of the contract. So I pay down the risk. So we're trying to get those numbers so you guys can make the most informed decision.
Madam Chair, I need to go to another meeting, but if you're looking for volunteers to work on this, I'd be happy to volunteer.
Well, I'll say
Yep.
we will need to vote on this at the next meeting at the latest. And so we're hoping that people can ask as many of the questions that they have today. And if there's information that you need, if you could let us know now, you can reach out to staff afterwards, but we also want to avoid serial meetings too. So before you leave, are there questions that you have? Okay.
Except I really am look forward to this unfolding.
Okay. And would you say then you're in favor of them?
I'm very much in favor.
Okay.
And Cole and I have had some other discussions too about some maybe thinking outside the box ways that we can do things possibly differently than the way the current contractor does them that could potentially have some cost savings.
Mm-hmm.
So we're not by any means, we're not done. We will bring a recommendation back in March for approval, and it will, hopefully be a lot less than what this cost estimate is, and hopefully gain some efficiencies.
And Commissioner Strand, I don't want to keep you, so if you need to get going, go ahead.
Thanks, everybody.
But yeah, so we just want to make sure that we have everybody's questions answered. Are there questions that people have, or again, is there information that anyone would like before? This has obviously been well vetted within the city of Fargo.
I guess my question is when you're adding this number of employees, and I don't know if it says in here how many.
It'd be about 100 FTEs.
Okay. Is that going to impact staffing in the payroll and other HR departments in the city of Fargo? Is that going to be a cost that's going to be shared by the MATBUS system?
So yeah, I would say if there is additional costs incurred from HR, that would be included in our indirect cost allocation plan and then pass through the system that way. But yes, there has been discussion about adding an HR person as part of this transition to be able to manage those 100 FTEs.
The original plan for the consolidation included bringing people in-house, but then it also included another HR person as part of the overall scope of the program. So-
And that's not reflected.
That hasn't been reflected in here yet, no. Okay, so I will make a note to
Probably be
include
good
that,
to, yeah.
to know what those indirect costs would be.
Right.
Yep.
Yeah, I
Yeah,
think as
can I-
much as possible, being able to see how that would affect each of us in terms of what our allocations. would be.
Yes.
We have a question online?
Yeah, this is Jenica.
Jenica?
So I guess Susan too, I know you guys are looking at ways to cut costs, right?
Yes.
So I don't know if you kind of have a target in mind for 2026 budget, as far as what you're looking at, but I mean, obviously these driver services and just overall, then now salaries will be like a very significant piece of this budget. So yeah, like Jordan was saying, if there are other ways to look for savings that we could show that this would reduce that overall cost, I think that would be helpful. Because I don't know where else you're kind of looking or what areas you're looking to do cuts in other categories, but this is by far the largest piece of that budget.
Yeah, that was gonna be my comment is I think this needs to be part of a larger discussion. I think Julie can give a little bit of an update. We got some kind of disappointing news today from the legislature. Business, yeah. So we're if we do not get money from the state, we're gonna have to make significant changes to MATBUS. And so my question is would we want to decide like what the routes need to be or how we can achieve that budgeted number as we're evaluating this? Because that would affect how many people we bring on in-house. It would affect what we would ask a contractor to provide. Is it easier to be more nimble with changing bus routes if they're employees rather than a contractor? I mean, there's just a lot of things to discuss, I think.
Yeah, there's a lot that feeds into it. I think a couple of things when when Mike was asking about some of the indirect costs, currently we tap into human resources, the safety person for the city of Fargo. If we were to bring on these drivers, et cetera, and their management staff, they would all be safety sensitive people. So, or positions. So we would take that away from HR. That would not be a task we would expect them to carry forward, that we would have our own internal safety manager that would do that.
Is that
So
built into these projections though?
That is, yes.
Okay.
So then to that point, there may be some indirect costs that come out of HR, but then there might be additional costs that go in because of this additional HR person. So that might be a wash if we take some duties away from HR but then they add some. So
yeah, we have to sift through that.
And these costs are including an estimated roughly 25% increase in the contract cost.
True, correct, yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
But we don't know that. I mean, it could come in less depending on bidding and that kind of thing.
It could, like historically, looking back at our last two contracts, we have seen anywhere between a 20 and 25% increase from the end of one contract, which we're in right now, to the beginning of a new one after bidding. So historical numbers would tell us that we're going to see at least a 20% increase. Our last two contracts we got out for bid for, Transdev has been at the lower end of the bidding proposals that have come in. We have seen in our last one, there was one proposal that was 40% higher than what Transdev proposed. There has also been concerns from the legal side of awarding a contract again to Transdev because of some litigation that we're in right now. So if that were off the table and other bidders bid higher, we may be stuck with a higher bidder than what Transdev would come in at. So there's definitely a lot in play there as far as who we may be willing to do business with and what that might cost us.
This allows us to sort of control that uncertainty on a
Correct.
3-year basis.
There's some issues with union versus non then as well as like driving time and more flexibility for picking up different routes or maybe using the team more efficiently.
Yes, we would have definite operation efficiencies, without having to work with the union restrictions on some of the drivers, yeah.
I think probably the reason with the criticality, not only of budget discussions, but timing, it's about a 6-month process if we are to bid it out. So with budget coming up on both sides of the river, we're coming up to, we either need to say, yep, let's pursue this, or you're gonna have to bid it out again.
Right. Again, emphasizing the importance of, we will be taking action on this at our next meeting. So is there anybody else that has any further questions? Or again, if there's information that you would like brought back at our next meeting, let us know. Not, again, you can reach out to staff if there's something that you hear that you would like additional information, but we'll plan on taking action at our next meeting. Okay, moving on to 3B ridership update.
Just a little ridership updates and data I missed last time for our paratransit ridership. 2023, we had 57,545 rides, and in 2024, we had 50,436 rides, an increase of 5%. And then a little information about ridership updates going forward. I'll be doing quarterly ridership updates the month after the quarter, so we'll go over the previous quarter, and then a yearly ridership update January the following year. And if at any point you need ridership data, or you're curious and need some numbers, so there's my contact information to reach out to me anytime.
Great, I see that uptick. Any questions or comments for Louis? Yeah. Okay, moving on to our last informational item, safety and security updates. Cole.
Thank you. So just for the sake of time, I won't be going through all these safety and security issues that we've seen over the last month. I just want to kind of give a couple of updates from when we talked last time. We have been in contact with Fargo PD, kind of building some bridges there, so we can have some more open discussions with them as to getting some thoughts on what we can do to help curb some of the issues that we're seeing at the ground transportation center, especially. We haven't created any committees or boards or anything with that yet, but taking steps to get to that point. One thing that we have done is we started a new security contract. We are now with Signal Security. They're the company that has provided service out of the 13th Avenue Walmart. They started up at the beginning of February, so I've been in it for about 2 weeks, and so far I've been doing a good job. With the savings that we saw from our previous contract to the new contract here, we're able to add about additional 4 hours of security each day at the ground transportation centers. So they're there at 10:15 a.m. to 10:15 p.m. when we close. So still not covering all of our hours quite yet, but taking steps to be able to get to that point. Another thing that's interesting with this new company is they also have a couple of resources that the previous one didn't. These safety officers wear body cams. They're upgrading to a newer system right now, so that should hopefully be even better going forward. So hopefully that'll help deter some of the issues that we're seeing. As you all have probably seen in the last week or two, there was a news story about incident that was right by the ground transportation center. Unfortunately, we are familiar with the individual that caused that, so definitely more to work on for sure, but a couple of positive updates there. We're also looking at getting signage put together. Our marketing team is working on that to be able to put something up in the buses to notify people that they are being under video and audio surveillance, as well as potential penalties for any sort of interference with the driver. So with that, I'm happy to answer any questions, provide any comments.
Questions or comments? Okay, I know we're a little over time. Cole, I just want to thank you, and I encourage everybody to keep reading these, and I appreciate the updates. And please let the staff know that we understand and value appreciate the difficulties that they're dealing with, and look forward to looking at ways we can continue to address these.
Absolutely.
Okay, and we do have for other business, I'm going to turn things over to Julie to give us a legislative update. Sounds like not very good news.
Yeah, well, we're not 100% sure yet. Before this meeting, I was communicating with our City of Fargo person that is the lobbyist for the City of Fargo that is out at the legislature. We did introduce a bill, Senator Boucher, who is with Fargo, introduced a bill, Senate Bill 2254, and the request was for funding through the state for the 4 urban properties that are in North Dakota. So Fargo, Minot, Bismarck, and Grand Forks. So we have a team that we're working with Senator Boucher on, and we went out and testified, and the proposal initially was for $15 million for the biennium to be split between those 4 urbans. For fixed route service and for paratransit service. So that was what we took forward, went through the hearing, the committee, and got reduced down to 5 million. We have provided quite a bit more information. It's in appropriations right now being discussed. And 7 o'clock this morning, I found out that it sounds like they've reduced it down to 2 million from the 5 million. We're not giving up. We're going to keep asking and keep supplying data. So when we have our calls weekly with Mike Redlinger and Brenda and the team, cabinet team from the City of Fargo, he did mention on our last call that of all the bills, well over 100 that were introduced from the City of Fargo, there's about 10% remaining. So we're still hanging in there. I really hope they understand the value and see what it is we're asking for and why we're asking for it, the criticality of them helping us. So we'll see. I think anything is better than nothing, but I'd be remiss if I didn't say I'm a little disappointed that they have knocked our numbers down twice. So, yeah.
We're told that it's kind of the way they strategize.
Yes.
OMB has all the bill expense and their waiver budget, and as the bills get whittled down, they'll change that and perhaps kind of reallocate. So
right.
A bit of that.
Yeah. So we'll keep after it and we'll give you an update in March if it makes it through. There's, I guess, different scenarios that can occur. Senator Boucher has been a real champion for us to try and get us some funding. And then if we're able to get any funding, or even if we're not, we also have requested during this biennium that we have a study approved through the legislature that will allow us to identify more of a long-term sustained level of funding for the urban transits. And it's, state of Minnesota, they support transit, as you well know, to a great degree. And we would like to see North Dakota, we know we're not getting into the levels of Minnesota, perhaps not in our lifetime, but it would be nice to see something going.
Very surprising because the hearing on Monday was really positive.
Very.
And it was a lot of non-urban legislators in there, and they seemed to understand and were receptive to it. So it was really surprising to see that this morning.
Yeah, yeah. So more to come on that. So, but that's, we'll see.
Okay. Any other business to come before the body? If not, I'll entertain a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
And a second.
Second.
All in favor, signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Motion carries. We are adjourned.